According to the cloud.
To the cloud. It always sounds so mysterious. This.
I know.
There's the cloud, right? Nicole,
Hey, Nicole.
hi.
Hello, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Wish we were doing dinner tonight with all of us.
I know.
That would be fun. That would be
lovely.
awesome.
Diane, do you have mountain photos to share?
My husband actually put some up on the Facebook and on the Instagram for the FAI. So
Cool.
you can look at some pictures. Yeah.
Is that the substitute so we can't go hiking but we can stare at mountain pictures? Is that
Right? Yeah, exactly.
okay? Fair enough.
It's gorgeous.
I would say
here.
that I do have ways of accessing mountains in virtual reality. So that's
All right.
Cool.
maybe we can find a mobile virtual reality viewer, and then there's like cardboard headsets that you can use your phone.
Well, yeah. You know, I could have put my background for Zoom, you know, as the mountains.
Right.
I could have done that.
You could
But I decided it's actually better to be real. So
because when you melt into the mountains, it's a little weird the way
it is a little, yeah, it is kind of funky.
right.
Martin Bazzani does it, but he wrote a book about that, so it's okay.
That's right.
All right, so welcome everyone. Go ahead and put yourselves on mute and ideally take off your video. Not because I don't want to see you, but we've had some accidents where people forgot they were on camera. So ideally it's for you, not for me. Okay.
And we will have, I will be fielding questions for Ryan. I'm going to take my video off here in just a second. But I'm excited that Ryan's here. I'm excited because I have done a lot of things with him, and he is always very professional and he knows his stuff.
Well, I would say very professional.
Well, okay. No.
A little bit more casual, but yes, thank you, Diane.
But you are in for a treat with your Brain on Exercise. Ryan, as the creator of the Brain Health Trainer course, I've taken that course. It's very rigorous. It's outstanding. And we use it here in my studio in Denver for our clients. It has really enhanced our training here. So I'm very excited to have Ryan here as our brain expert and to help us integrate. You know, brain training is just as important as your physical training, and it is actually interrelated. So I'm excited to have Ryan. And like I said, please keep yourself, like Ryan said, please keep yourself muted. We're going to turn off video so that you can be focused on what Ryan's doing, and I'll field questions for people and I'll feed them to Ryan. Okay, take it away, sir.
Thanks so much, Diane. All right, everyone, welcome to your Brain on Exercise, sponsored by SmartFit, Seize the Now. If you missed my first talk, it is recorded, so you can go back and view it. That talk was called Boosting Your Brain with Cognitive and Dual Tasks. Now, that is focused more on cognitive physical training, whereas this presentation is more focused on ideal exercise prescription for brain health. So the fitness professional typically is doing or facilitating exercise techniques or sessions for individuals. This session is about that to a degree, but is also agnostic to the fact that you can actually help people reach a certain exercise prescription without even facilitating a session for them. So exercise prescription, we often hear about it, or EXRX, and it's perpetuated by ACSM and the Exercise Medicine Credential, among other things, and is this almost lost art that personal trainers don't typically tap into. And when we are creating programs for people, there are usually aspects of those programs where they're doing it with us or they're doing it on their own. And the material I'm going to present today is rather agnostic. You could do both. It could be you're facilitating everything or some of their exercise program or none of their exercise program. And this information is also for you to see what can your exercise program consist of for ideal brain health. So this will not consist of cognitive physical training techniques or dual task techniques. That was my other presentation, and you'll be able to view that if you are interested in viewing these things. But I think this information should precede that because it's the bigger picture of if we are going to do exercise for brain health, what might that look like? So without ado, we'll go ahead and start. A little bit about my background. I've been in the industry for about 10 years. I have a background in exercise science. I'm just wrapping up a master's in applied neuroscience and writing my dissertation on exercise prescription for various neuroinflammatory biomarkers. So neuroinflammation can underlie a lot of neurodegeneration, depression, things of that regard. And I'm looking to do a literature review on what might be the exercise prescription for certain aspects of neuroinflammation. I'm a brain health coach from the Amen clinics and a functional aging specialist, among other things. And I work at the Pacific Brain Health Center in Santa Monica, where I currently am, where we have neuropsychologists, psychiatrists, neurologists. We see over 500 patients a month with Parkinson's, MS, traumatic brain injury, mild cognitive impairment, dementia, and individuals with no cognitive impairments who just want to prevent cognitive decline. I operate and manage a 3,000 square foot medical fitness studio called the Fit Brain Program. That's its exclusive focus is to focus on outcomes for brain health, not weight loss, not knee pain, but brain health. So hopefully we can inject a little bit of that spirit into your practice after today's webinar. So we are currently in many crises and pandemics, but one of them that has been talked about prior to those and still will be talked about and will be thereafter is the dementia crisis. We see here from this graphic that exponentially dementia rates are increasing throughout the world, as are mental health conditions. Now, can the fitness industry actually make an impact in this? Well, let's do some math. In 2018, 5.8 million people living with dementia in the US. In 2018, about 400,000 trainers. Both of those numbers are growing, by the way. So if we do the math, that's about a 12-to-1 ratio. So even though these numbers are significant, they are exponentially growing. They almost seem overwhelming to a degree. If every health and fitness professional was trained to address brain health, either from an exercise prescription standpoint and or being able to have a medical fitness practice and refer to brain health-based clinicians, and or being able to facilitate cognitive physical exercise techniques or dual task techniques, all of those are great efforts to hopefully use the fitness industry's skill sets to slow cognitive decline and prevent these things from happening. Now, I'm not saying that 400,000 trainers should all be training people with dementia. It's actually very unlikely that you're training a lot of people with dementia. 95% of your practice is probably people with complaints of cognitive impairments. Maybe they've noticed things have changed, either undiagnosed or quote unquote normal individuals with no cognitive impairments beyond the normal changes that occur with aging. But aside from just thinking about dementia, what are other conditions that can affect cognition and brain health besides just neurodegenerative conditions? Well, medications is a big one. And you can probably, if you think about how many of your clients are on medications, and geriatrics especially have been subject to what's called polypharmacy, lots of different medications. This can affect brain health. Obesity and metabolic disorders, cardiovascular conditions, cancer and chemotherapy. So whether we're special populations based or not, just by working in the older adult population, we're going to have different factors that affect brain health, usually deleteriously. So it strongly behooves us to understand how we can facilitate it. In addition, different sorts of chronic conditions or acute conditions like COPD, syncope and falls, congestive heart failure, diabetes, mild cognitive impairments, sleep apnea. Many of these are extremely common and can affect a pretty significant percentage in terms of those populations having cognitive impairments. So let's go over some brain basics. Before we talk about what we can actually do about this, we have to understand how the brain changes and how it can be changed. Before we get into that, I alluded to this aging curve, this curve of cognitive aging over the lifespan. And there's normal aging. Let me get out my laser pointer here. Okay. So there's normal aging in which everyone experiences slight cognitive changes during aging. This could be processing speed, certain types of executive functions, which we will define, and even visuospatial abilities. Now there's two green lines. Ideally, we're at the top, but even if you're at the bottom, you can see that, or the second green line, you can see that the trajectory, it's almost like a ramp, and that ramp changes in angle, and we want to angle that ramp either on this plane or upward, right? Now we know we can't go like this, or we can't go backwards, but we can alter that trajectory of aging specifically in relation to cognition, and that's what our interest is. Whether you have a risk of dementia, whether you're afraid of dementia, which many people are, or just afraid of cognitive decline in general, even if you don't experience anything clinical or abnormal, we can actually delay some of the normal changes that occur with cognitive aging. Now there's this preclinical phase that could be someone on the blue line. And this light blue line is certainly not optimal, but it's hopefully not converting to MCI or dementia, which we'll explain. But there's people on this blue line may experience preclinical symptoms of cognitive changes. This could be subjective cognitive impairment or subjective cognitive decline, which may go on a medical record, but isn't necessarily a diagnosable condition. It's related to silent changes in the brain without measurable symptoms. And you may be experiencing changes in your memory. And you can see there's not a huge delta between this aspect of the blue line and the green line. So it may be difficult for individuals to differentiate what is normal and what is subjective cognitive impairment. What is likely more pronounced is mild cognitive impairment, where those cognitive changes are of concern to an individual or the family. One or more cognitive domains may be impaired, so it could just be memory. That's called a nestic MCI, or it could be multi-domain MCI, which is more than one cognitive domain that's impaired. There are preserved activities of daily living, but maybe certain activities become a little bit more challenging. It's likely that a majority of your people are on the normal aging curve, or maybe the middle one, or maybe in the preclinical subjective impairment, subjective cognitive decline phase, or they could be having MCI and you may not know they're diagnosed because you may not know to ask about it or what to do about it or understand it, or they may have it or maybe in between these areas and not have been diagnosed. For a majority of the population, over 80% of older adults 65 and older feel that's important to receive a memory evaluation or cognitive testing, but only 13% actually seek it out. So a big opportunity of fitness professionals in our industry at large is to be able to refer people for the early detection of cognitive decline, which if that was your only role, if that's the only thing you did against this epidemic, you would be helping to save the healthcare industry trillions of dollars. Early detection of cognitive impairment is absolutely key. Now, if we do have individuals with MCI, this could, it's the steepness of this curve could be modified by a lot of different factors. And we're hoping that it doesn't convert, but it can, to dementia, which there's many different types, Alzheimer's disease being the most common, affecting over 80% of most dementia cases. But then we have Lewy body dementia, vascular dementia, of course, different phases. Dementia can be defined as cognitive impairment severe enough to interfere with everyday abilities. So it behooves us to understand where we might be at here, where individuals might be at here, and we can only do that with brain health assessments from a series of clinicians or individual clinicians that specialize in this. Now, we have this amazing ability called neuroplasticity. You've probably heard about it. It's the brain's ability to change in response to experiences. But as we age, the amount of effort that change requires is greater. Now, typically as we age, we tend to do less. We retire, we don't drive as much, we stop working as much, we stop seeking out very cognitively demanding things, maybe we exercise or are active less. That is not the point. The point is to actually be more cognitively and more physically active as we age, because more effort's required to make significant changes. This is true for brain health. Now, there's a theory called cognitive reserve, which isn't directly measurable, but can be, it's basically a theory, and it's, there's a lot of different ways to measure brain health, whether it's types of neuroimaging, cognitive testing, biomarkers, subjective cognitive abilities. But what we're looking at here is cognitive reserve, and we're thinking that these things actually facilitate changes in brain health, according to various studies. So there's modifiable health factors that can influence cognitive reserve. That can include exercise, which is the focus of today, but it can also include sleep, stress management, diet, and things of that regard. Then there's level of education, very important, stay in school. We have social support, positive affect, stimulating activities and novel experiences, and cognitive training. Now, you may be thinking, well, what do all these mean? And there's a lot of ways to get these essential brain nutrients and vitamins, if you will. We're going to be talking primarily about exercise, and we'll talk about how layering different stimuli onto exercise, like having your exercise include social support. I know everyone knows about loneliness and social isolation. I don't think we've really felt those things in ourselves or our clients until now, where we've been quarantined. You can really see how much it impacts mental and therefore cognitive and emotional health, right? Social support is absolutely critical. So how can exercise be utilized as a medium or vehicle for social support? In addition, our exercise program should seek out to give positive affect or promote positive mood states. In addition, our activities, our exercise programs, whether we're delivering them or recommending them, should consist of stimulating activities and novel experiences, and ideally some level of cognitive demand. My previous presentation, Boosting the Brain, focused a lot on this, but we'll be talking about this at a higher level. The interest of doing this is so we can influence cognitive reserve, and the mechanisms in which we do so is through neuroplasticity, which we'll further define, and morphological changes in the brain, whether it be brain function or brain structure, that influencing positively cognition, then behavior, activities of daily living, and quality of life. Okay, so what is cognitive reserve? It's kind of like a gas tank in your brain, if you will. The higher our cognitive reserve, the longer we can stave off neurodegenerative diseases like dementia. The lower our cognitive reserve, the sooner those things might be able to happen. So let's say, even though genetics load the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger, let's just say you don't know it, nobody else does, but you're destined to get dementia. Even if you stave it off by 5 years or several years, that can save tons of money for the healthcare industry. It can be immensely valuable to your clients and yourselves. And to live 5 years with your mental faculties still intact is probably more worthwhile than say, oh, I'm not going to be healthy. Let's just get it when we get it, right? And so to be able to increase cognitive reserve is of great interest. Even if you have a neurodegenerative condition like dementia, Parkinson's, mild cognitive impairment, stroke, the more effort you put into cognitive reserve prior, the likelihood that you'll deal better, slow that decline is greater. So cognitive reserve is incredibly important for that reason. Now, there's different types of neuroplasticity. There is structural neuroplasticity, in which neurons can actually be created. There's functional neuroplasticity, whereby new synapses can be created, then they can be strengthened or they can be weakened. So functional neuroplasticity is likely to happen sooner, and we'll show some ways of how that can happen. For now, let's watch a quick video.
Is real data. Microscope at neural tissue going down through an area of the brain called the medial prefrontal cortex. We can use these microscopic images to reconstruct the three-dimensional layout of the neurons and really see the intricate and intertwining patterns that they make. These connectivity patterns throughout the brain underlie all neural function and are responsible for everything from controlling your muscles when you tie your shoes to how you feel about your family. Understanding these patterns is a massive ongoing project for neuroscientists everywhere and could lead to breakthroughs for everything from consciousness to depressive disorders and schizophrenia. In this example, we injected purple dye into a far distant brain region called the amygdala, which is largely where our emotions and feelings of fear are generated. The purple wires are axons, or connections, coming from the amygdala into this area. We've also used some recent advancements in genetic engineering to select only the neurons inside this region that connect to the amygdala and dye them green. By combining both the green and purple dyes, we're able to see the full circuit of connections, viewing both the neurons that connect to the amygdala and connections coming back in from the amygdala. The locations and patterns of the neural connections, called synapses, show us how heavily these two groups of neurons are connected. To help us start to understand the incredible complexity of these neural networks, we develop computational techniques that segment or isolate individual neurons. By isolating a neuron, we can measure its characteristics, like size, shape, how many branches it has, and what general type of neuron it is. This may not seem like much, but it's really important for understanding so much about the brain. For instance, we know that malnutrition, stress, and cognitive disorders can all change how these branches look, but there are so many details that we don't know. That's why we, as scientists, keep pushing the envelope. To tackle these very complicated questions, we are getting together and combining fields ranging from physics and biology to mathematics and
So very inspiring, just to give you an idea of what this stuff can look like in high definition with neuroimaging, different dyes to parse out different levels of the nervous system. So we are going to talk about this more, but I think it's helpful to understand not just the microscopic levels of the brain, like the neurons and the synapses, but also the macro level, like the brain structures and regions. Some of these regions we'll define. We have, this is a little bit oversimplified, so please excuse me. But we only have about 5 regions of the brain that we'll talk about in this presentation. Before we do, let's look at another video detailing the different levels of the brain, starting with the macro, going to the micro. So we'll turn off the music so I can narrate this. I'm no Morgan Freeman, but we're starting with the gray matter, going to the white matter. That goes away. And then we have the ventricles. Really, what we're looking at is the deeper, more primitive brain regions here. That was the hippocampus, or we're getting down to it. The putamen's part of the basal ganglia. So these are very deeper brain structures, and you're not going to see at the surface. There's the brainstem. All sorts of fancy terminology. There's the amygdala. You've probably heard of that. There's the hippocampus, responsible for learning and memory, and does modify in response to exercise and lifestyle. So they're not that color. That would be really far out. These are using dyes. And then we've zoomed into the neurons and synapses here. You can see dendrites, those little mushroom-like blob projections on the outside of them. Really cool stuff. This should be a ride at Disneyland or something, I'm telling you what. All right, so helpful to understand the structures there. Let's go over some of the regions here very briefly. So the temporal lobes process sensory input and are responsible for visual memory, language, comprehension, and emotions. They're located immediately underneath your ear. So if you put one hand over your ear, around that area, kind of right underneath your palm, is the temporal lobe. Plays a role in auditory and visual processing, but the medial temporal lobes, which are sensitive to physical activity levels, they're smaller when you're less active and bigger when you're more active, houses the hippocampus, which is critical for memory formation and storage. The prefrontal cortex and the frontal lobes are involved in planning, complex cognition, and movement. It orchestrates goal-oriented behavior, is responsible for social behavior, which I have very little of, decision-making and language, and houses those executive functions, the CEO of the brain, as some may call it. The parietal lobe integrates sensory information, smell, touch, pain, visuospatial, navigation, proprioception, is important for language processing. The cerebellum receives information from the sensory systems, regulates motor movements, coordinates posture, balance, coordination, speech, and coordinates eye movement as well, and is necessary for motor learning in the development or the learning of new skills. Finally, we have the occipital lobe, which is primarily responsible for vision, is the center of how we perceive visual inputs and directs it to other regions in the brain. And perceiving objects sends information to the temporal lobes, and perceiving location will send information to the parietal lobes. So you don't have to memorize any of these specifics, just to give you an appreciation and a primer to some of the general brain regions and their functions. Now, in terms of how the brain changes, or how long it takes rather, synapses, which are the connections between these neurons, those little red dots that you're seeing, are neurotransmitters, in which synapses send neurotransmitters to and from other pre- and postsynaptic terminals. The synaptic modification can occur in milliseconds, right? Maybe not significantly, but this is why we can change things so quickly in relation to learning or stimulus. The branching of synapses and dendrites can occur over several hours. New brain cells can occur over several days. In neuronal network changes, these networks of neuronal cells can occur within several weeks and months. Now, this isn't exclusive, or certainly there can be deviations to these rules, and they're not rules to even, they're just guidelines, if you will, in terms of timelines of how the brain changes. Let's give another example of functional brain changes or functional neuroplasticity. We can see these neurons lighting up. This is what brain activity looks like under certain neuroimaging. So it looks very, those are astrocytes, which are supportive cells, or like the fascia of the brain listening into neurons. Here's another one, neurons under a microscope. There should be some sort of music to this, maybe something pulled from a Charlie Chaplin movie. But really cool, you see how it's functional connectivity leading to structural connectivity of them connecting, right? So these are the synapses connecting, functional brain changes underline structural. Speaking of structural, higher level brain changes can take several months and years. And this is an example showing neurons in rats, those who are sedentary having less neurons in their hippocampus, and those that are runners having more neurons in their hippocampus. Okay, so now let's talk about theories of aging. So there's various ways that we change. We've looked at a lot of different layers of the brain, from gray matter to white matter to different areas like the frontal lobe. And so we're not going to go over this in detail, but there's various aging theories that dictate changes in structure, function, biology, and or communication. All of them have something interesting to say, and some of them present, oh, well, certain areas of the brain change in function, or certain areas of the brain change in structure, or maybe it's at the cellular level, that's hard to say. Maybe it's at the endocrine level. Maybe it has to do with sensory input and sensory deprivation. All of them are true to a degree. There's no all-encompassing theory of aging. These multiple theories of aging dictate that all these different neurobiological underpinnings underlie aging, especially in the brain. Let's apply some of this. So how can this actually occur in, say, an area like the hippocampus, which is very sensitive to these changes? It can start with neuroinflammation. That can lead to a reduction of trophic support, oxidative damage, what's called cellular senescence, protein aggregation, things like amyloid proteins can accumulate. That can lead to a downregulation in neurogenesis, synaptic plasticity, less dendrites, and a loss of neurons. That can lead to hippocampal atrophy, for example, therefore lead to cognitive impairment, and therefore lead to neuropathologies like dementia or Parkinson's disease. Now, dietary interventions, physical activity, cognitive stimulation, stress management can help to slow or avoid a lot of these steps, if you will. Here's another chart showing a young, healthy brain with synaptic spines, and you can see what it looks like in middle-aged. And if we look at mild Alzheimer's disease and severe Alzheimer's disease, we can see those ventricles and brain structures are much smaller with the presence of amyloid plaque, and that synaptic spine therefore has less projections. Let's watch another video of how something like Alzheimer's changes the brain.
In healthy people, all sensations, movements, thoughts, memories, and feelings are the result of signals that pass through billions of nerve cells or neurons in the brain. Neurons constantly communicate with each other through electrical charges that travel down axons, causing the release of chemicals across tiny gaps to neighboring neurons. Other cells in the brain, such as astrocytes and microglia, clear away debris.
Oh. Hold on.
Away debris and help.
Let's let it load for a second. Gotta love technology. All right, let's try playing it now.
Keep neurons healthy. In a person with Alzheimer's disease, the most basic form of dementia, toxic changes in the brain destroy this healthy balance. These changes may occur years, even decades, before the first signs of dementia. Researchers believe that this process involves two proteins called beta amyloid and tau, which somehow become toxic to the brain. It appears that abnormal tau accumulates, eventually forming tangles inside neurons. And beta amyloid clumps into plaques, which slowly build up between neurons. As the level of amyloid reaches a tipping point, there is a rapid spread of tau throughout the brain. But tau and beta amyloid may not be the only factors involved in Alzheimer's. Other changes that affect the brain may also play a role over time. The vascular system may fail to deliver sufficient blood and nutrients to the brain. The brain may lack the glucose needed to power its activity. Chronic inflammation sets in as microglial cells fail to clear away debris, and astrocytes react to distressed microglia. Eventually, neurons lose their ability to communicate. As neurons die, the brain shrinks, beginning in the hippocampus, a part of the brain important to learning and memory. People may begin to experience memory loss, impaired decision-making, and language problems. As more neurons die throughout the brain, a person with Alzheimer's gradually loses the ability to think, remember, make decisions, and function independently. A Achieving a deeper understanding of the molecular and cellular mechanisms and how they may interact is vital to the development of effective therapies. Much progress has been made in identifying various underlying factors. Advances in brain imaging allow us to see the course of plaques and tangles in the living brain. Blood and fluid biomarkers are providing insights about when the disease starts and how it progresses. More is also known about the genetic underpinnings of the disease and how they can affect particular biological pathways. These advances enable the development and testing of promising new therapies, including drugs that reduce or clear the increase of tau and amyloid proteins in the brain, therapies targeting the vascular system, glucose metabolism, and inflammation, and lifestyle interventions like exercise or diet, and behavioral approaches like social engagement that may enhance brain health. Research is moving quickly, ever closer to the day when we can delay or even prevent the devastation of dementia.
I'll stop there. And, that never gets old. It's always helpful to see the mechanisms, especially in high definition. So thank you, National Institute of Health. But the interesting thing there is, yes, drugs are being developed, therapies are being developed. But according to the World Health Organization, the intervention or interventions that have the most evidence weight, that are at the top of the list, the most confidence for preventing cognitive impairment and decline in dementia, exercise. And guess what people do not have or are not doing enough of or do not have a specific prescription for in relation to brain health? Exercise. So I have the pleasure of seeing many patients who have this interest. Either they have cognitive impairments or want to prevent cognitive impairments. And every time I sit down with people, just making a basic exercise program for them beyond the normal assumption that walking is good for your brain because exercise is good for your brain and you should go to class. That's great. That's better than not. Or some people are meeting that 150 minutes because that's what they're hearing. But beyond that, it usually doesn't have any specific level of detail or personalization. That's what we are going to address here. So if the World Health Organization puts it at the top of their list, but there's no personalization or counseling services for it, which fitness professionals could provide, that to me is a crime. And so if you went to a nutritionist because you heard food was healthy, which is not a very specific recommendation, and they just said, just make sure you eat food, you would probably leave that appointment very, very disappointed. For exercise, that is what's happening. It's our most confident intervention for preventing cognitive decline and improving brain health, yet we just recommend it generally as if people are gonna figure it out, actually adhere to it, or have a multimodal exercise prescription for brain health, right? And so we're gonna get into some of the science of exercise in the brain, but that was a great video for contextualizing me and kind of putting me on my soapbox here. Anyway, I digress. So there's various levels in which exercise affects the brain, okay? So there's behavioral levels in which there's improvements in mood and cognition, and then physical activity and exercise itself is a behavior. This might sound confusing, but what I'm trying to say is that when people exercise, they're more likely to exercise again because they improve cognition and mood, which is likely going to increase the chances they exercise again. Exercise itself is a behavior that does often need to be coached and is necessary in this formula. There's also molecular changes like BDNF, irisin, and others. And if you've heard about exercise in the brain before, you've probably heard a lot about brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF. It's just one of the many proteins, molecules, and hormones that are released at a micro level to impact brain health. And then there's neuronal changes, or through the process of neurogenesis. This could also be neural networks in addition to individual neurons. Those also constitute micro changes. My beef with how mainstream media communicates the benefits of exercise in the brain is that they just talk about BDNF and neurogenesis, when you can see that's maybe only 1/3 of the equation. And there's other things besides BDNF and neurogenesis that underlie these changes. We are chasing after micro level changes, and the reason is because micro level changes, like if we just said we're chasing after that, that's like saying we're chasing after actin and myosin for muscle hypertrophy. But we know that it takes weeks and sometimes months to encounter sustainable muscle hypertrophy. Even though it's not fair to compare it to the brain being a very different organ than that contained within the neuromuscular system, we are after structural changes, and that takes longer. So we're after brain activity changes, which can underlie volumetric changes. And that can be increasing brain size or preventing the loss of brain volume. So we have the behavioral, micro, and macro level structures. Okay, let's start with a brain region called the hippocampus. Its decline is attributed to age-related memory issues, and increases in size are usually attributed with aerobic exercise and physical activity. It also happens to have this very interesting correlation with gait, including rhythm and locomotion. Let's talk about the prefrontal cortex. Let's talk about resistance training. With resistance training, there seems to be structural and functional improvements in the frontal lobe and lower white matter atrophy and lesions with resistance training. It also includes improvements in executive functions. So we're already starting to know that, okay, the hippocampus, both the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex can be modified by aerobic and or resistance training, but why are these studies coming out showing they might have differential effects? That's very interesting. In addition, when we do motor fitness, and motor could be synonymous with skill-based, coordinative, neuromotor, there's a lot of ways of saying this. There seems to be improvements in cerebellar volume and the basal ganglia when we undergo motor training or coordinative training. It also seems to address specific skill-based pathways that mediate cognitive improvements. And there seems to be interesting correlations. So do people who avoid coordinative movements, things like Tai Chi or dance, avoid them because their cerebellum either shrank or decreased in function, or does it happen the other way around? So it's a very interesting theory that I've had various patients that would never catch themselves dead on a dance floor, yet undergoing neuroimaging, they have smaller cerebellums. And this is very important to understand because certain people might have areas of their brain that are preserved, like the hippocampus, but have shrinkage in the basal ganglia or cerebellum. And research shows that motor fitness addresses those areas, but cardiovascular fitness doesn't. And it depends on the type of intervention specifically, but I think it's important to address that. In addition, with resistance training, we can release things like insulin, like growth factor or IGF-1. So strengthening and hypertrophy are important. It's not just about brain blood flow and aerobic exercise, and that can increase cognition, reduce falls, etc. In addition, over 80% of the brain's gray matter seems to be modifiable by physical activity. So all these red heat maps, these are areas of the brain and gray matter that research has shown to be effective by exercise. So this is pretty impressive. Although there are issues with this study, there's some statistical issues, so it doesn't really clarify specific populations, it doesn't really clarify interventions or ages. Certain regions are most changed, those happen to be the temporal regions, the parietal regions, and the frontal regions. So it doesn't mean every area of the brain changes like every other area of the brain does. There's certainly more or less neuroplastic regions. And then this paper failed to really differentiate physical activity from physical exercise. And of course, the study populations were mixed. But I still think it's amazing that this much of the brain can be modifiable by physical activity just as humans. I think that's amazing. And it should encourage you to think that you have the power or believe you have power and be able to change the brain for the better with exercise. In addition, white matter changes can be modified in response to exercise. So there's some research showing that just increased cardiorespiratory fitness levels improve greater white matter tract integrity in the areas that connect the medial temporal lobes and the prefrontal cortices. We've also heard of physical frailty, but there's also something called cognitive frailty. So cognitive frailty, different than physical frailty, although they can often co-occur, can start with sarcopenia, increased cortisol levels, depletion of testosterone. Sarcopenia and testosterone is also, well, actually, all of these can justify why things like resistance training, which are relatively ignored or under-recommended in older adult populations, are so important. Insulin secretion, pro-inflammatory cytokines, and mental health issues like depression and cardiovascular disease can all be factors contributing to or be representative of cognitive frailty. This is a complicated one, but it's to give you an idea that the neurobiology of exercise is very complex. We have exercise, which can be combined or consists of external inputs, which can go to different brain regions, contribute to different mechanisms in the central nervous system, and contribute to different functions or behaviors, and therefore mediate the likelihood of certain disabilities or diseases. So we're not going to go over this in depth. We do in the Brain Health Trainer course, but this is just to give an appreciation. It's like looking at a very beautiful statue that you don't really understand, that this stuff is complex. And you can understand this, but we don't have enough time for the sake of this presentation. Of course, mental health. We cannot forget that the power and the importance of mental health. In addition to a dementia crisis, we're also in a mental health crisis. This is especially true for geriatrics. It doesn't mean that if you're geriatric, you're depressed, but there is a lot of research recommending that many older adults that are cognitively impaired also have mental health issues. Which came first? How is neuroinflammation involved? These are all interesting research questions. But some of the benefits from exercise on mental health include increased energy, improved confidence, increased self-esteem, improved sleep, improved mood, and reduced stress. So even if we're going to talk about exercise prescription, and you're going to get this idea that maybe a certain prescription is ideal, or you have to pertain to a perfect exercise prescription to get the benefits. But even just acute exercise, one bout, can deliver good results, right? How significant, how sustained, that depends. And usually it's not as significant or sustained if it's just one session. But really, if we can get people feeling mentally healthier, it's likely that they're going to increase their adherence to something like exercise and therefore derive many of the brain benefits. So we've presented a lot of information. This is a summary slide. I created this graphic to summarize a lot of the research available. We've talked about the frontal lobe and how it's affected by cognitively demanding activities, research or resistance training, mind-body exercise like Tai Chi. The temporal lobes seem to be more affected by cardiovascular exercise and general physical activity. Then we have the cerebellum, which seems to be impacted by coordinative exercise and skill-based exercise, as is the basal ganglia. Then we have the occipital lobe, which is responsible for vision and therefore likely stimulated with visuospatial demands. There's been research showing that masters athletes compared to sedentary controls have larger occipital lobe volume. So people who are athletic well into late adulthood maintain the volume of this region. The parietal lobes are likely to be stimulated with sensory-rich activities. I know I don't have enough female representation here. I know these people are young. It doesn't have to be these activities, but it's just to give you some ideas of why just aerobic exercise is not the only thing you can do for brain health. In addition, we should have cognitive demands in our exercise programs and techniques because that's how we evolved. We hunted the antelope, not writing an essay, sedentary, not going on the treadmill watching the news, or doing a bicep curl in an exercise machine. We use functional movement with cognitive demands that are environmentally changing with our sensory and attention systems with motor learning and control demands at both slow speeds and fast speeds. So it's not just high intensity aerobic exercise, it's not just Tai Chi, it's not just aerobics, it's not just resistance, but it's also skill-based. And so this can justify skill-based modalities and cognitive motor training, but it can also justify a variety of different domains because that's how our bodies and brains co-evolved. So what's wrong with just basic exercise? Well, Dr. Adele Diamond recommends we need to go simply beyond moving to moving with thought. Most exercise activities require a little thought, and most research is showing, well, it's early research, but it's accumulating in terms of meta-analysis and systematic reviews. And some of this research is saying that cognitively engaging exercise appears to have a stronger effect than non-cognitively engaging exercise. My last session, Boosting the Brain, talked more about this, but we're going to talk about it as it relates to having cognitively demanding exercise as an essential component of your exercise prescription for brain health. Exercises that train and challenge executive functions like those found in dance, sports, and martial arts are likely to be meeting these requirements, and exercises that bring joy, pride, and confidence are also important. Do not put your grandmother in a Taekwondo class if she does not want to be there, right? All right, shout out to Functional Aging Institute. There is also validity for this multiple domains of physical functioning, neuromuscular, balance, cardiorespiratory, mobility, cognitive training, musculoskeletal training, also contributing to or being representative of multi-domain exercise programs being important for brain health as well as physical function. So we can achieve both goals simultaneously with a multi-domain approach. All right, let's get into it. Diane, do we have any questions that I'm unaware of?
We do not at this time. You can keep going.
Okay, great, thank you. It sounds like I have put everyone asleep at this time, or I'm doing an okay job. All right, exercise prescription. So is the general recommendation enough for brain health? Let's find out. So you've probably heard this before, 150 to 300 minutes of moderate to vigorous intensity aerobic exercise. Now, let's talk about someone who is not reaching this. Is reaching this a good goal for brain health? Yes, your job should be to get people here. But my issue with this recommendation is that they don't go any further. What if people are already there? Or if we looked at it like calories, if I said eat 2,500 calories a day, and I would ask, well, does it matter how I get those calories? And now just get the calories. We know better now. We know that how we get those calories, the quality, the makeup of that diet matters. I would like to argue that not only reaching this is important, but the makeup of the 150 to 300 minutes is also important. Yes, they say additional benefits for neuromotor training, strength training, and more minutes is there, but we can go even further. Research shows that multi-domain exercise programs slow the progression of cognitive decline more than single modality programs. So having a combination of resistance, aerobic, and skill-based is going to help more than just aerobic. Also, longer interventions that are adhered to over time are going to be better than shorter interventions. And there's a recent research study, which we'll review, talked about how you had to reach 52 hours of exercise in older adults, regardless of modality, to significantly improve executive functioning and processing speed. So this could be over 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. Whenever you can hit those 52 hours is when you're likely to get those benefits. So that study reviewed 98 randomized controlled trials totaling over 10,000 participants over 73 years of age and older. 59% were normal, healthy older adults, 26% had mild cognitive impairment, 50% had dementia, and 58% did not regularly exercise before study enrollment. That's the 52 hours study done by Dr. Joyce Gomez-Osman and her team. And so there's a lot of questions, but really just hit 52 hours. It doesn't matter how, and you'll get significant benefits, right? It could be at 3, 6, or 12-month intervals, like I said, but I think that's a great study. That's not to say that what I'm about to present doesn't matter. If you only were able to get someone to 150 minutes until the point they reach 52 hours, you're good. Now, if you stopped exercising after 52 hours, yes, you'll maintain some of those benefits, but it's ideal you keep exercising. You're also likely to get a stronger cognitive effect from untrained individuals. So let's go over the 3 primary exercise modalities. We have aerobic, we have steady state and interval training under aerobic. We then have strength training, which could be closed skill, things like machines, or open skill, functional training. And then we have motor and or skill-based modalities, mind-body exercise, dual tasking and cognitive motor training, sports, dance, and martial arts. So these brain health ingredients are likely to include resistance training, aerobic exercise, cognitively enhanced exercise, which could be from dual tasking or cognitive motor training or exergaming, much of which I presented on in the previous Boosting the Brain webinar, and then skill-based exercise like dance, sports, and martial arts. So just to be very, very general, 2 to 3 days a week per modality, right? I know there's only 7 days in the week. That's why it's a range. Cardiovascular exercise, resistance training, skill-based exercise. So if you did 2, 2, and 2, you'd be chilling more than, you'd be better off than people who were just doing one modality, if that makes sense. I got the question about the 52 hours time frame. Once again, it could be 3, 6, or 12 months. That's going to be dependent on the individual's motivation, access, etc. Okay, Diane, I threw this in last minute when I knew you're going to be here. All right, so this was from the presentation that we did on Tai Chi and brain health. It doesn't just have to be the skill-based modality, the one on the right, does not just have to be dance, sports, martial arts at higher intensity. Remember when we showed that evolutionary model of brain health and cognition, it was slow speeds to fast speeds. So even Tai Chi can help gain some of these benefits. So cardiovascular fitness, motor fitness, coordination, social interaction, it can have elements of meditation. All of those things are beneficial in Tai Chi, can contribute to brain structure and function, and therefore cognition. So it's both low, moderate, and high intensity exercise that will help with this. Let's give a sample exercise program. A beginner that's a little adverse to a lot of change, doesn't want to work out every day. They only want to contribute, adhere to a couple different modalities and maybe 4 times a week, right? So we have let me bring out my laser pointer. We have, let's say on Monday, we do bikes and weights. That's a multi-component training program. So she's doing 30 minutes on the exercise bike and 30 minutes weights, probably by herself for 60 minutes total, 6 to 8 out of 10 of intensity. That's using the RPE scale. For Wednesday, we can do dance because she wants to dance. She used to dance, she's not doing it anymore. And she would want and loves the social interaction. That's 60 minutes, 4 to 7 out of 10. Friday, we do that multi-component bike and weights again. And then Saturday, we have walking program, 2 to 5 out of 10, 60 minutes. This is really good for those older adults that don't want to adhere to a really intensive program, and maybe they're doing it on their own. In addition, you could say, well, once to twice a week on top of this, I'm training you. Or you could say once to twice a week, maybe Monday and Fridays, I'm facilitating one or both of those sessions. So that maybe you can make sure in that session, you can substitute the bike for another cardiovascular stimulus that's more functional and cognitively demanding. A more advanced program would be a 7-day-a-week program, right? And we're not expecting that people do this, but many people are super motivated for brain health, especially because brain health can be a fear-based motivator. That can be a bad and good thing, but if we make it into a positive, we can have people adhere to these really complex brain health programs that are exercise-based. So EPAP stands for Exercise and Physical Activity Program. This one's developed for attention. In the Brain Health Trainer course, we teach you how to create different exercise prescriptions for theoretically different cognitive outcomes like memory, attention, and reaction time. So this one's for attention. Multi-component training program, aerobic training, resistance training, and balance, 20 minutes each type leading up to 60 minutes, moderate to high intensity. That can be repeated Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Tuesday and Saturday is Tai Chi. One of those days is live in a group or virtual in a group, 30 to 60 minutes, lower intensity, and then they're practicing it at home for maybe 30 minutes, lower intensity. Then we're also doing dance, which is skill-based dance. There's a difference between certain types of dance. Zumba is not cut from the same cloth as salsa. So there's skill-based, choreography-based, and et cetera. And also there's fitness-based. So this is 60 minutes of a skill-based type of dance, low to moderate intensity, maybe higher. That's repeated Thursday and Sunday. So this is a really good program. You could certainly substitute dance with a dedicated resistance training day. It's missing dual tasking explicitly. This is assuming that the individual is not training with you. You could substitute days if they are, so on and so forth. Okay. All right. Let's talk about acute variables. So a lot of them you're familiar with: frequency, duration, intensity. Those seem to moderate brain health, although according to that 52-hour study, it didn't really matter. But in the interest of being skilled exercise counselors and program developers, we want to go beyond that. What are the different variables that might make a change in this? But also, in addition to the FIT principle, or the frequency, intensity, time, and type, we also have skill. What are the skills we're teaching, and how novel are those skills? And then also, what's the environment? Is it virtual? Is it in the home? Is it outdoor? These things will likely make a difference in brain health outcomes as well. And of course, we can't forget there's other lifestyle factors besides exercise and physical activity. There's sleep, there is diet, there's stress management, medications, comorbidities, cognitive stimulation, social support, and beyond. So the more you can be a complete health and fitness professional, understanding behavior change, health coaching, medical fitness, nutrition, the more you can help people with their brain health. With exercise being the one we're starting with because of who we are as fitness professionals, and as individuals, starting with that usually as a primary skill that we know and love, right? Okay, additional resources for special populations. If you want to learn more about how to apply these in mental illness, Parkinson's disease, medical populations, or special populations, these are all great resources. In addition, I'm collaborating with some of the authors of or organizations associated with some of these to create courses on exercise and mental health, exercise and Parkinson's disease, etc. And of course, I have to self-promote. We've had for over a year, or almost a year, we've had a 10-hour course called the Brain Health Trainer course that helps you understand the neuroscience, helps you learn how to program and apply cognitive physical training techniques, help you structure intake interviews. It's over 10 hours, e-learning, approved by all your favorite accrediting organizations. We've trained over 800 professionals now. So it's everyone has loved it so far. In July, we're about to launch Brain Health Trainer 2.0, and we're really excited to do that, in which if you sign up for this course, you will be automatically upgraded to 2.0, and I'll give you the details of how to access that course. But who the heck is going to ensure all this happens? So I think we need to understand that coaching is an inherent skill associated with exercise counseling. And the way to define this is facilitated self-directed neuroplasticity. What does that mean? Facilitate means to make easy, and it's Italian or Spanish for facile, which means easy. So you're helping people achieve their goals easier. So if we know that we need to adhere to an exercise program that is multimodal, that may or may not include you, right? And even if it does include you, it's only for maybe 10 to 30% of the time, we need to coach people, right? So it is neuroplasticity to coach people, but you're helping them self-direct neuroplasticity. And another way this could be understood is self-efficacy. So how to transform from who you are now to Fit Pro 2.0, a person that is coaching for brain health, is using behavior change techniques, among other skill sets. Well, one, you need to give a poop, right? Find your why. What conditions fire you up? Do you have a family member that's been affected by neurodegenerative diseases? What connects with your story? What can you get excited about? What problems can you find that you really want to solve? Get additional education in brain health training, health coaching and behavior change, medical exercise, special populations, and then market yourself, niche yourself as a medical fitness professional, update and refine your value propositions and set yourself apart. In addition, if we want to include aspects of that skill domain, we talked about dual tasking and cognitive motor training. Once again, please refer to my recorded session on boosting the brain for more on this, but there's low, mid, and high-end technologies for doing this. Let me get out my pointer here. Of course, we could use speed, agility, and coordination exercises, in which I do in the Brain Health Trainer course and in my webinar, to facilitate more analog cognitive tasks, things that are generated by the professional and by basic equipment. We even have virtual reality that can deliver cognitive training, mental health interventions like meditation and support groups in virtual reality. This company is called XR Health, and they actually cover your insurance and they deliver you they're covered by insurance, and they deliver you a headset so you can experience these interventions. The SmartFit is one of my favorite interventions and technologies. We use it in our clinic. I'll show you some videos today. They have sponsored this session. And if you want to learn more about SmartFit, they are a cognitive motor dual tasking technology. They're the only technology that has a broad array of cognitive tasks in the form of different technologies. SmartFit has been one of my favorite tools for applying cognitive motor dual tasking in sessions. Of course, we have other pieces of equipment like mats with numbers and different types of stimuli like Procinos, for instance. So let's watch a quick video on SmartFit and how they are actually, they've created a solution that is portable, that can go in the home, that could be delivered over Zoom. We're actually having patients who have this in their home, and I'm zooming in to coach them through it. Of course, this is showing physical distancing guidelines, but let's watch a quick video of how their portable solutions and home-based solutions could be utilized in this context. Great technology. I use it for all of my programming in the studio. If you want to learn more about SmartFit, you can go to the virtual expo or smartfit.rocks/FAI-conference. But the easiest thing to do is just go to the virtual expo on the homepage of the Functional Aging Summit, scroll all the way down to the bottom right, and you'll see SmartFit's page there. You just click on the button and you'll go straight to the landing page to learn more, see a live demo, schedule a meeting, and see the show specials they got going on. Certainly, it's not the only thing you can do for brain health, right? But we've talked about that skill-based modality, usually including some aspect of dual tasking and cognitive motor training. And if you're interested in offering that in your services, I would highly recommend it. But also, if you are not yet ready to go to higher tech, The Brain Health Trainer course does offer examples over an hour and a half of them of how to use very common equipment like dots, agility ladders, speed, agility, quickness equipment to facilitate these types of techniques as well. So why would you incorporate brain health training or brain health value propositions into your business? Well, as we're finding, demand is very high for brain health services and programs. People just probably don't know to ask you for it yet. So you have to message that to them. Then, and of course, you need to be trained and know what you're doing before you message it, which is why we have the education that we do. It's very helpful for retaining. So I hear a lot from people in the industry that they've almost run out of goals. They've helped them achieve their weight loss goals. They're out of pain and they're living their best life, but they want new goals to be able to retain and focus on versus just maintenance or improving general health. So brain health is a long-term goal, one of many weeks, months, and years, is generally perpetuated by fear, and with the right education can be flipped into a positive to adhere to more exercise programs and specific ones that you might deliver. In addition, it's not just training them to get out of pain and be physically fit and functional to be able to play with their grandkids. It's not just being able to play with their grandkids, but being able to remember their grandkids' names. So it's an inspiring way for you to understand the importance and impact of recommending brain health-based services and programs to your clients. If you want to learn more from the Brain Health Trainer course, which consists of over 10 hours of interactive graphics, neuroscience theory, and turnkey programming, you can go to www.brainhealthtrainer.com and you can use code BRAIN200 at checkout for $200 off. I will have that website up at the last slide. If you want to contact me, there's my direct email. You can email me any questions you have. You can follow me on Instagram at glatt.brainhealth. And of course, you can go to the Brain Health Trainer website, www.brainhealthtrainer.com for more information. And I think this is the first time, I think, ever that I've ended on time, Diane.
That's not true, Ryan.
I think it is. I can't remember the last time I've ended on time, at least on.
So Max had asked a while back, he said if someone already has been diagnosed with dementia, exercise may possibly slow cognitive decline. Is that correct? It's my understanding that unfortunately it cannot be reversed. He just wanted to confirm that with you.
Okay, let me see that. So if someone's already been diagnosed with dementia, okay, great question. So there's some conflicting research here. Overall, the summary of that research is that we know exercise to likely be very helpful for people with dementia. It depends on their individual biology. It depends on what that intervention is. It depends on if that intervention is stressful or not. It depends on all sorts of, polypharmacy. There was a couple of conflicting studies coming out recently showing that people who had dementia and exercise got worse. Now, the question is, was that due to the sample size that was selected, the specificity of the neurodegenerative disease pathology itself, or was it the fact that the programs or the interventions that were selected maybe were not appropriate for that population? So what the World Health Organization is saying is that we are very confident exercise can do a lot for slowing cognitive decline if you're normal or maybe just have some subjective impairments. There's less evidence, but still evidence for those with cognitive impairments. So the more cognitively impaired we get, the less profound changes you're likely to make with exercise alone, right? So I am of the thought that exercise will help dementia symptoms, even if it's not cognition. It could be mood and quality of life, which can improve cognition indirectly. And there are plenty of research, there's plenty of research demonstrating that it can have positive benefits on cognition. Also, what research is showing is if you start earlier, it might be more domain specific, so we can be even more specific with our exercise prescription. But with dementia or mild cognitive impairment, it's likely to just be more global, those changes cognitively in response to exercise. So it's not that it can or cannot be, it's that we're still researching it and we need to know more, but we all should be generally of the philosophy that it does help regardless of who you are or where you are at your stage of life.
Awesome. Ryan, you have such great knowledge and great experience. It's really helpful to all of us with this. And if you guys have more questions, type them in your chat. Turn on your chat. And if you have any questions, Ryan is always available. I know you have his contact information there too, and he's very responsive in that because
Usually.
he is very passionate about this brain health thing. So
If I don't get back to you in time, it's because I'm busy, but I do make a point to get back to you eventually. Jacqueline, you said the website's not loading. Just make sure you spelled brainhealthtrainer.com correctly. It's easy to mix it up. I just tested on a couple devices. It seems to work fine for me. For some reason, it's blocked by your internet. You can go to the Functional Aging Institute's website and then access the course registration from there. So I will hang around for a couple more minutes. Thank you all so much for your time. Diane, thank you for moderating and supervising me. So I stayed on my best behavior.
you always do, right? There is one more.
Excellence, you know.
Lamar is asking about meditation certifications. Do fitness professionals need one?
That's a great question. There's a lot of different processes on that. You know, meditation certification can be very lengthy. I know there's programs that take a year at length, and it's kind of like health coaching where it's kind of just getting standardized, and there's people before it was standardized calling themselves health coaches. So meditation certifications, you know, there's many out there. I'm not going to comment on which ones are best or which ones I recommend, but I will say mindfulness and meditation stress management is important for brain health. Mindfulness-based stress reduction is the most evidence-based in terms of brain health outcomes in general, in my opinion. I will say that I know of a Tai Chi certification that is good, and I know Tai Chi is important for brain health.
Right. I was just going to say movement meditation is one of those categories with meditation. And yes, there is a Tai Chi certification. So open the door to Tai Chi. And Ryan, thank you for that little plug. I appreciate that. But if you are interested in Tai Chi a little bit more, we're not going to talk about it here. You can come to my session tomorrow.
That's right. And then Martha asked if I have any more sessions. I do not by myself, but I did do a pre-conference, which I'm not sure if you can still register for retrospectively or not. I'm sure you'll be able to, with Dr. Chris Thompson on brains and balance. That was about a 3.5-hour pre-conference that we did yesterday. It was a huge hit. I did one earlier this morning about 2 hours ago on boosting the brain with cognitive and dual tasks. That is recorded, so you can go back and watch it. And tomorrow, I'm going to be with Dr. Evan Osar, Robert Linkle, and Dr. Chris Thompson. We are the Age Well Collective, in which, don't worry, Diane, you'll be a guest in that as well, and we're very excited to have you. It's not male dominated, don't worry. And we are talking about the optimal aging paradigm. Saturday, that is tomorrow at 12 p.m. PDT, 3 p.m. EDT, and we'll be touching on cognitive health in that. And then Jim, does your course recommend how we bring this to the public? I think it would, yes, we do touch on that. In version 2.0, we are developing more resources. There's also a Facebook group that you are added to, or you have the option to join, where we're posting about this all the time. Presentations that I've sort of sanitized without my branding or name that you can then put in your credentials and your business information and deliver that to a group of doctors, deliver that to a community. There's plenty of marketing ideas for this. Certainly the course, there could be a whole nother course on that, but there's plenty of marketing support. Anytime there's an issue with marketing this type of information that isn't covered by the course, we are either adding that into 2.0 of the Brain Health Trainer, or we are addressing those questions in the Facebook group actively. So if you have someone in your community, it sounds like you have a doctor or a neurologist that's into Alzheimer's research. You know, there's a lot of ways to approach it, but I will tell you, doctors, and it's not even polarized anymore, whether they're progressive or not, everybody is or should be recommending exercise because of the evidence base for brain health, especially in the context of prevention. So as long as you approach them in the right way with the right education, which the Brain Health Trainer course can help you get there, people are usually receptive to this and they're very excited. So hopefully they answered you. Do I work with assisted living companies already, like the Bristol? I don't know what the Bristol is, but yes, I've consulted various assisted living and senior living communities and how to integrate these programs, how to train their staff. I would say that assisted living and senior living is a different animal, but this has been very popular amongst that community. So please reach out to me with my email there, rglatt8@gmail.com. I'll also type it in if you had any questions about that. Happy to help. Glad I could answer the question, Jim, and thanks for the kind words.
And I think we have time just for one more. If there's anything else, we do need to exit the room and let you guys take a break before you can go to the next session. But Ryan, thank you again. This has been great. I think you're on the cutting edge and helping us all to be able to bring it to everybody. So thank you so much.
Well, it's a team sport. It's an honor to be on your team. I think we're all a big team here. So it's my pleasure. Thank you all so much for hearing me blab. And hopefully it was meaningful and helpful. And if you need to reach out, I'm always here to help. And look forward to seeing you all later in the summit at the Optimal Aging Paradigm, hopefully, and in the near future.
All right, we'll see you.